Welcome to the 5th episode of the Lorelines podcast. Fowl and Hawk here. I hope you all enjoyed our new intro, Compliments of Coberon. Here we go. Two primals, two stories, one really good segment. Today we are discussing Hydaelyn and Zodiark, also known as Crystal Mommy and Crystal Daddy. Time to get into it. Uh-oh.
We're popping up.
We appear to be
was
popping
silent. I was not. I had to desktop you guys.
There we go.
Yep.
There we go.
Welcome
Okay,
to the
cool.
fun.
Professionals. So, where do we get started? Should we introduce ourselves, or do you guys already know about us?
Let's be real, they only care about Crystal Mommy and Crystal Daddy.
It's true. It's
Why they're here?
deadbeat dad and drunk mom.
Sludge, before we get too deep into this, who is quiet, who is not? I can turn up outbound, possibly. No?
Chat, who's quiet?
Yes, me.
Because I wasn't talking.
Mouth is preparing for the death gasp that we're gonna give her today.
Oh boy. That sounds
Found
Yes.
a bit quiet.
I'm quiet?
Please,
This will reign supreme.
please don't be cruel to me.
Oh, but no.
I'm still convalescent. Okay.
Where's the cat, though?
I may have to kick her out of my room. So please don't summon things. We know how this is. We know summon things isn't going well. Today we're
Oh my
going
God.
to illustrate the point.
I thought you were talking about core healer.
Oh God. I'm not the only cat in here. Come on.
Yeah, I'm a cat too. Meow.
Man,
Oh God,
No,
the ghoul is.
Oh, no. See, that's the way to start it, huh? 250.
Ghoulus, the official Lorelines warrior of light.
There we go.
Yes.
See, there we go. There it goes. Is she quiet now?
I knew I was going to do something today.
All right. So today, like Fallon said, we are talking about Zodiark and Hydaelyn. I want to start by talking about Zodiark, diving into where did Zodiark come from, what was Zodiark for, and what happened to him. So let's just cover kind of the bases that are laid out in the game. Bonnie, you want to go first?
I think Bon is dead to the world, but yeah, she can talk.
Yeah, I'm dead
That's
to the world for
why I
the
want you
moment.
to go first.
Oh boy.
No, necromancy isn't cool, okay?
I mean, it's canon in the game now, so.
God damn it.
Wow.
So where do we even start, honestly? Are we starting from Shadowbringers? Because things happened that changed everything about what we thought was going on.
It's true. I think we should start with the final days. So we talked about Amarant a few weeks ago, and let's talk about, where did Zodiark come from? Like, what was the concept, and what was the objective of Zodiark?
So we all know that Zodiark was summoned to help stop the final days as they approached Amarant, as Amarant was on the brink of destruction. And we know that there was an opposing faction who disagreed with the summoning of Zodiark and all that happened afterwards, who's led by a Amarantine named Vana. And they conjured up Hydaelyn to serve as his shackles, as his jailer.
And we'll talk about them later.
That's a synopsis, though. So
Yeah.
think of it like almost like the relationship that Illidan and what's her face had. Val, help me on this one.
Sylvanas Windrunner.
No.
Go team.
Wait,
Warden.
we're talking about
Shadow
Illidan,
Song.
Warden. Yeah, Maya have Shadow Song. We're talking about Illidan,
Yeah.
not
World of
Arthas.
Warcraft is a feeling.
Yeah, it's kind of like that relationship almost, except this isn't WoW.
Nope, it's super not.
This has
Yeah.
world consequences.
So, who would like to go first so Cobron can shoot them down?
Oh my lord.
Don't all go at once now. I've been waiting for this sketch for a while now.
Well, see, the funny thing is I have the lore book open, and then immediately Cobron was like, no, that's Charlayan propaganda. You get that later.
Charlayan propaganda!
I can feel him stirring death lasers.
Why don't we start by reading what's in the lore book and then shooting it down and then talking
That's a great
about that?
Let's go with
Yeah.
that.
Sure, why not?
I'll go with that. Yeah.
Oh, so I'm going to start with dimensional compression. The students of Baldessian and the Scions of the Seventh Dawn have both allocated resources into learning more about the phenomenon. Their findings are as follows. Deep within the ethereal sea, light and darkness wage a never-ending war against each other. Equal in strength, their battles end in standstills, maintaining a balance in the world. However, there was a period where the strength of darkness grew, disrupting the balance. From within the Mother Crystal, the Will of Light, Hydaelyn passed judgment on darkness that should be physically excised from the planet and cast the Will of Darkness, Zodiark, into space, where it became the moon. However, in doing so, Hydaelyn tore the very dimensional fabric, creating a rift which spawned forth 13 mirror images, which have since evolved separately from the original. This hypothesis continues by stating that the 14 original parallel dimensions, the original upon which Eorzea exists, 7 have already faded into oblivion at the hands of the Ascians, who, from the safety of Eorzea, worked to topple the walls between dimensions, causing them to collapse in on themselves. Their purpose? To regather the Aether distributed amongst the 13 mirrored planes and concentrate it back to the original, where it can be used to wake the exiled Zodiark and restore him to his rightful place back within Hydaelyn. This process, compressing 14 dimensions back into one, is what the Ascians refer to as the Ardor, and it is most certainly spells destruction of life on Hydaelyn as we know it. That is dimensional compression.
So, yes, that's mostly correct, but again, it's from that perspective of
There it is.
post Hydaelyn, like 12,000 years after the fact. This is kind of what we think happened. So we know the reflections exist. We know the Ascians are trying to rejoin the worlds, but they don't really know why. I did like the part about Zodiark's rightful place, because when we talk about summoning Zodiark, we really had the will of the star being made manifest. So from what I understood was that it wasn't so much the will of the convocation, and those directives of the convocation that really drove Zodiark. It was they imbued the planet with a will of its own, and that was what the first half of the sacrifice was for. And then in order to power Zodiark, they sacrificed another half, and then that was really what drove Zodiark, was the planet itself saying, I want to live, I want to survive. This thing that's happening, this sound is very unnatural, and I'm going to remake the world as I want to see it. And then we get the World of Zodiac, which is what we get after the final days, but before the Sundering.
I've always had this issue with the story we get from Emmett Selk and the Amarat sequence. It makes me very nervous when you're sacrificing 25% of all life and making a super intelligence. And then that thing wants to keep eating people.
I mean, yes, and I talked about this earlier too. Was like I'm steeped in Star Trek lore too, but Zodiark really reminds me of the Genesis device from Wrath of Khan, where it can just completely wipe out all life on a planet, and there really isn't a right hands to have that kind of power. And like, it doesn't matter if it's well intentioned, like that can be extremely destructive, and you can really destroy a lot of things even with those good intentions and that power of creation.
I think it should probably be
everyone else.
Yeah, I think it should be noted though that we don't necessarily know for sure that Zodiark actually wants to keep eating people, only that the summoners had decided that they were going to keep feeding Zodiark to get what they wanted out of Zodiark after the fact.
That's what I got from it.
Yeah, and that he's probably not like other primals that we see in more modern times that are driven more by a desire to grow.
Now, what we do know is from the post-anti-tower cutscene is that, according to Hydaelyn, quote unquote, Zodiark coveted power. So that doesn't necessarily mean that Zodiark was looking to get more power, but just trying to keep the power that he already had.
It could also be that he requires power to do his job, as primals seem to require power.
I hear the cat.
There it is.
Yes.
I am a bit low. I wonder why.
So we can go. I'd say let's keep going over the book and then adding to Cobran's perspective as to like it's kind of like a mirror image of like here's Hydaelyn's perspective. Here is the perspective of a let's say Zodiark's perspective or like a neutral perspective of how an outside perspective of how it works. So gosh, I kind of jumped ahead there. Let's go with the Ascians now. Throughout history, whether it be in folklore or myth, there have been mention of dark, shadowless figures known as Ascians who, with their twisted words, would incite strife between peoples, most recently teaching the beast tribes of Eorzea how to summon primals and essentially igniting a war spanning multiple continents. According to recent research by the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, there is proof that the calamities, once believed to be natural occurrences, were actually triggered by the crooked schemings of the Ascians in an attempt to bring a phenomenon known as the rejoining, a form of dimensional compression desired by their deity Zodiark.
That actually sounds more like propaganda than the previous.
Now that one,
It's propaganda.
no, that one I will agree with. That one is very much painting the Ascians in a very dark and sinister light. So that one I will agree with Cobran on.
I would also tend to agree that that's their perspective of them.
I agree with that.
Oh, I know you're
And the cat.
I also agree.
It's okay. You tried. You tried. Have you taken medicine yet?
I mean, if she starts mewing a lot, I'll have to kick her out of the room. But if
I've got to step away for about 2 minutes.
and she bit me. So yeah, she.
Unassuming Venusaur, I absolutely agree, and I will go into that later. But yes.
So I'm going to also go over the eras now. Eorzea has been defined by its periods of growth and prosperity, wherein civilizations have risen and thrived until being brought down by terrible disasters known as the calamities, which in turn bring upon ages of darkness known as the umbral eras. The most recent calamity occurred mere 5 years past and constituted a night of destruction in which ushered in a period of chaos and uncertainty known as the Seventh Umbral Era. This calamity was a result of the fall of Hydaelyn's lesser moon Dalamud in the 15-second and 1572, because I can't speak, year of the sixth astral era. Upon the satellite's arrival above the Kartna Flats in central Eorzea, it split apart, revealing the Elder Primal Bahamut, who, in a fit of inchoate anger, laid waste to anything and everything around him. Up until Dalamud's fall, many sixth astral scholars convinced themselves that the fact that there had already been 6 calamities, each representing one of the 6 elements, was proof that there could not be a 7th, and that the 6th astral era would last indefinitely. However, subsequent study of Garlean Empire legatus Nail Van Darnus' meteor project would eventually lead these scholars to the conclusion that the attack by Bahamut was indeed a calamity, though not one represented by any one element, but rather consisting of all the elements charged astrally. Following much deliberation between the scholars and the ruling parties of each of the 4 Eorzean city-states, the consensus was finally made to deem the years following Bahamut's advent the 7th Umbral Era.
See, that's
propaganda.
That's propaganda too. But
Absolutely.
There's at the same time, it's like this is the Charlayan scholars' theory, and they say, okay, it's an all elemental calamity because we already have all 6. It's kind of I'm not going to say a stupid reasoning, but it's kind of
They certainly
strange.
didn't have the whole picture, yeah.
But at the same time, in the ocular, do you remember when the XIV shows us which calamity and which element was triggered each rejoining? The
Yes.
7th was kind of darkness, and later we discover that darkness is the first term for the combination of, well, I'm not really sure if it's the combination of all elements, but definitely there's something about that. And actually, when we see in the ocular the hologram of the 7th, which actually is the 7th shard rejoin in the 7th umbral calamity, and that one was kind of it kind of looked like darkness. So it would be, from the Asian standpoint viewpoint, I would understand that after a calamity of darkness, they would need a calamity of light, but yes, it's kind of
Well,
it's kind of.
And
also-
Elidibus did say that darkness was starting to gain sway after the 7th umbral calamity, so that makes sense. But I want to refer to what Thancred said about darkness being what they consider astral in the source.
Yeah, when we speak with Orion J, he tells us about the first nomenclature being reversed, and he's basically, yeah, I think they got it right.
I actually have a thought I'd like to share. I'm thinking it's out
Go
of
ahead.
order, but basically, Elidibus leaving Zodiark ruined everything. I'm serious. I'm imagining like the brains of the giant robot leaving, and then Hydaelyn wins.
Stingy.
And also, Elidibus's entire role in the convocation is to sometimes work against and sometimes work with his brothers to maintain etheric balance. And so, like, full robot suit Elidibus might have managed the planet just fine.
I have a lot of
I
thoughts
think you're
on
right.
that.
He hopped out.
I would beg to disagree simply because most primals do have ego. Most primals have self. Yeah, you have enough. You have enough influence. You can take them over, like Xenos did with Shinryu. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Zodiark doesn't have a will of itself. I've thought since before 5.3, and I could well prove to be wrong on this, that Elidibus's job was in fact to control and direct that, to not let it run rampant, like what we could argue is seen on the Void.
Yeah,
With regard to the balance.
Elizabeth
So
is stingy.
basically, it would be like just endlessly creating instead of being a directed, focused creation.
Every single prayer, every single wish, that could get bad really fast. I don't know this is
Which
the case, but this is my fear.
sounds a lot like the Final Days, honestly.
Honestly, oh yeah, it sounds like a hope version of the fear running rampant, which I have noted before. With regard to the dimensional, sorry, go ahead.
To be fair, what we know about Zodiark maybe running rampant, maybe being a danger, that's just speculation, and that's just what we know from Benat's group. Because we actually hardly know anything about Zodiark. From what we know, Fallon spoke earlier about sacrifices, and I agree that's kind of a moral. From a moral standpoint, that there would be a room for debate. But one has to keep in mind that the ancients were not forced to sacrifice themselves; they did it willingly. So one thing is I offer my life, and quite another is I'm going to fuel the big robot with your life forcefully, and that's a big difference.
See, here's the thing that I think you're missing is it wasn't just the life energy of the ancients that fueled Zodiark, it was their souls. And when you talk about this universe where the soul is a known quantity, you can interact with it, you can alter it, but when you kill someone, their soul still lives on, it just goes back into the life stream. In this case, you're removing those souls entirely from the life stream in order to power this super creation machine.
Don't make me advance my friends. There was no rebirth theory back before the Sundering. That sounds like a topic for another stream, though.
That's very true. We could talk about that for a whole hour, probably.
Yes.
With regard to Zodiark and Elidibus piloting him, in the end, I think the most the thing that led me the way that I did with my assumption is when we know that Elidibus withdrew himself from Zodiark sometime well before Hydaelyn's summoning. And then when Emmett Selk is telling us in the Ravel about the conflict between Zodiark and Hydaelyn, what he says is, and they fought, and in the end, Hydaelyn was victorious. But it doesn't say Hydaelyn came and ganked a sleeping Zodiark or a drooling, mindless Zodiark. Zodiark plainly had will and the capability to fight back. It's just that Elidibus was performing some other function at the time when he was in there.
I wonder what that was. This goes back to what I was thinking. Like, we have a pretty reliable source for the information, but I mean it's literally a recording of Vinot stuff, and then obviously Emmett Selk's creations. But it does make you wonder if that's just the one side of the story and there are details missing that we're going to see later.
Oh, there's definitely details
absolutely.
missing, but I also think that Elidibus's final words, or at least some of his final words, were implying that he removed himself because he wanted to try and fulfill his original role as an emissary and bridge the divide between the people that was growing after Zodiark's summoning. So he left Zodiark's side to try and do that, but was caught outside of Zodiark when that occurred, when Hydaelyn came.
Yeah.
Additionally,
I
he
think-
would have gotten slighted
which-
if he was in the cockpit.
Well, it also, what Banana says is true, that Logarith was originally supposed to be the heart. And what this tells me that, that they were caught outside was that Hydaelyn's summoning really came as a sudden surprise and shock.
Precisely. It does not seem they could have anticipated such a thing.
I'm not certain, Meowth, that it was so different than our own.
Kind of. I mean, it's the simplest way to say it. But
Their time scale, the way they viewed the world, was on a very different length, a very different scale.
it's a different scope. If you're thinking in the immediate, just like the ancients, I see the ancients like they're way bigger because their scope is bigger too. So I actually, when of course I understand the viewpoint that 50% of the population couldn't have voluntarily sacrificed. Well, I understand from our mortal viewpoint that would be something kind of unthinkable. But just remember how readily the academia researcher offered his life force and soul to become sort of become Quetzalcoatl. So
Yeah, he became Quetzalcoatl, and it was awesome.
They probably had different assumptions about
Test.
and then be reborn relative to what we have now. Like, they felt probably more assured that if I spend my life energy now, I will come back.
Test. Hello.
The life stream.
Mm-hmm.
It's also interesting what the researcher says there. Something about giving his life in the name of noble creation.
yes.
I mean, because that's how their creations were given form. I mean, they were even registered at the offices. They gave up their life energy to see them come into life practically. That's how it basically went. I mean, the ancients
Test.
lived for a very, 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 very long time. As Emmett Selk said, almost nigh.
Test. Test.
Implies that they were immortal in the strict sense, but that they could live a very long time.
It's also worth noting I went and checked other languages, and it's the same deal.
To be-
Always,
to be-
almost
to-
occur.
It's but I this is some of a digression, but kind of it's kind of weird because for an ancient, their lifespan would be, if that's how they live, they probably consider their lifespan normal. But I understand that from Emmett Silk's perspective, the one who's lived among people and coexist with mortals the most, he is the one who probably understands better the gulf between mortals and ancients in terms of lifespan, which is interesting because almost forever for Emmett Silk, he's probably referring for us to understand that, because for the ancients, they just live that. I don't know if I explain it, if I make myself clear, or
It does seem to make sense. He's turning it around for our perspective.
I have a question actually about Zodiark. In one of the short stories, I think it's Through His Eyes, they specifically mentioned that one thing the ancients couldn't do was create a soul. But one thing we see after Zodiark remakes the world is that all this new life springs up and it all has souls. So do you guys think Zodiark actually was able to create souls?
I can answer that actually. One thing is very specific in the English, at least. It says he seeded new life. He put in the seeds for new life to spring, and we know that the planet, that souls spontaneously manifest in creatures born according to natural law. That does not mean that they can't create things with souls. I think my personal take, and this is more theory, is that Zodiark was the first example of them figuring this out, and the Primals are future examples of them figuring it out. But creating an object or a primal with a soul has proven problematic and kind of bad for the star.
Yeah, so what you're saying is basically that souls are like cats, and then the containers are like boxes, and if it fits, it fits.
I like that.
You had a jab at Meowth.
Yes, it was.
What?
With a Mikoto.
No, that's actually kind of. But I actually had one. I had one question, but I mean, because we understand that Zodiark is meant to be the will of the star, and it's probably the closest we have to the will of the star. But I was, as Ayumi was reading the thing, and I was kind of thinking on the definition of primal, and I was reminded of Isel and how Reisburger told her, the Shiva you summoned is but a phantom made of your own imagination. And we actually saw Isel breaking down that she had never considered the possibility that the Shiva she was turning into was not Saint Shiva, but a primal of her own creation. So I had to wonder if actually Zodiark is the will of the star, to what extent he is the will of the star, and to what extent he is the will of the convocation, because or the will of the convocation, or the whole ancients too, because that's actually valid. But I have to. I mean, it could well be.
It's interesting that you say that, actually.
That is a very interesting point.
Elidibus in, I want to say 5.2, I but seek to enact the will of the convocation. That's what he says.
Yes. I mean, I keep saying that if there's anything closest to the will of the star, Zodiark is way closer than Hydaelyn. That's for sure. But it doesn't mean that Zodiark is entirely the will of the star. He's meant to be that, but we don't actually know if that's the case. I guess we will. I hope we will discover this in 6.0 if we get to talk with them.
I find it exceedingly unlikely that they simply made the planet gain sentience, and instead I think that they just made a god steward for the planet.
Fair enough.
also add that when I was looking at the French and German for the scene with the anti-tower, where you go to actually meet the Word of the Mother, what Mephilia has become. And in French, it's called the Voice of the Planet. And in German, it's called basically a chat with the planet, very loosely translated in the German.
So basically, that implies that again, Hydaelyn took over everything Zodiark was going to be.
It does seem that way.
Yes, I would absolutely agree with that. And I'll talk about that in a little bit when we get to Hydaelyn.
I think we could probably jump into Hydaelyn pretty soon.
I want to. What was that?
Phrasing.
Okay.
I mean, Venat's already in there, so. Venonet, yes.
In any case, I'm in Zodiark because in many things, but because of many things, because his is probably the most unheard side of all this this situation, and it's easy to talk smack about someone if they cannot defend themselves, and Zodiark is probably the best example in all of this. And I would say that even though his existence and purpose may be perhaps a bit questionable in how he came to be, and how the thing is, Zodiark was meant to be as both a symbol of hope. He's the elder primal of hope, and he's also the only known anti-apocalypse tool that we know it works, you know. And right now, it seems we might have to, take the tool and actually use it.
I'm hoping that he can even talk, given that he doesn't have a heart at the moment. Like, there's a few questions about like how much of what Elidibus said and did was Zodiark, and how much of Zodiark on his own exists in a sense that can be communicated and can speak of his own voice and not rely on Elidibus.
Yeah. So
I'm still salty that the call back in Stormblood in 4.4 turned out to be the Exarch and not Zodiark, and just leaving that.
I was really hoping after the cutscene at the end of 2.0, where we get that echo vision of Zodiark, that we were going to start getting his perspective, and like he was reaching out and saying, "Help me! I don't know where I am." Basically.
It's also worth mentioning that with Elidibus,
where's our meow counter?
With Elidibus serving as the core of Zodiark, that most likely
Zodiark needs an adult.
Oh, he's based upon.
Remember to breathe.
Zodiark needs an adult to walk the ethereal plane.
Keep going.
And Zodiark was created with Elidibus as his core, and I use the term core because only English uses heart. Even the Japanese word is not kokoro.
I mean, I consider heart to be like the same thing. When you talk about the heart of something, it's basically
it has
the
multiple
core.
meanings in English that are not carried over to other languages, so I just use that word for precision.
I would
as this core, Zodiark is probably modeled after Elidibus in the first place.
I have to say I would prefer to use core, but that's just because I know something about that.
I'm kidding.
You don't want Zodiark to go doki doki, my heart go boki.
No.
So I do want to talk about one thing, and this is probably one of the only things I'll ever say positively about Venanco, is that they were onto something about Zodiark not being a permanent solution. So Zodiark remade the world, and they were like, this is a band-aid. It's okay for now, but it's not going to hold. We need to do something about it. Either remove that power and put it into something else, or do something, and that's kind of where Hydaelyn came from. And we know that they reached out to Azim. Azim was like, didn't even
No
go
response.
fuck off, no response. Just like, fuck it, I'm gonna go save my island full of grapes. Fuck off.
I'm so interested to know what the fuck we were doing when this was going on.
Looking forward to finding out.
I honestly have a
Yeah.
theory about. I really think Azim was a contingency in case Zodiark summoning went wrong. So if Zodiark was summoned, everyone was tempered, and the convocation just like lost their minds and went crazy, Azim was supposed to come in, clean house, send them all to the live stream so they could be free from tempering, and then bring them back.
Tempering is an
That's-
unforeseen thing. I'm not convinced of that theory myself. I think they were like, I'm going to punch the sound,
Pure
but
headcanon.
we will see, certainly. I have a feeling we're going to find out quite a bit about it in Endwalker.
Yeah, I hope either Azim went to go punch the sound a la Ifrita, or like Azim was literally just dead.
So
I'm
I want to say I have another headcanon about what happened. Oh god, that scared the shit out of me. I'm sorry.
Perfect.
I just saw that.
Perfect.
You're welcome.
Wow, perfect.
So I want to say that. So Azim abstained. Azim was like, I don't want anything to do with Zodiark. I don't want anything to do with Hydaelyn. I'm gonna go punch Ifrit on a mountain. Peace. But basically, I want to say that
Do it.
at some point, Azim became tethered to Hydaelyn, and I really want to say that right before the Sundering, Azim pulled a Louis Swa and sent the unsundered convocation members, so Emmett, Elidibus, La Habrea, yeeted them into the future, and then was like, okay, Hydaelyn, I will be your champion, but let them go.
that's
I was thinking more along the lines that Azim, because they're a traveler, had, among other things, a role to play in the development of teleportation magic, and that they were trying to summon their friends to them, in this case being those three, during some high-pitched moment in the battle between Hydaelyn and Zodiark. Like, they were trying to solve the problem actively while that was going on, but obviously they failed, in part because while they were teleporting their friends, the world got sundered, so when the three of them arrived on the other side of the summoning, the world was already sundered, and they were the only ones left intact.
It's very possible. It's very
That's
possible.
my personal theory on
Yeah,
that.
the-
matter.
Wow.
The only reason I don't immediately ascribe to that is because of what Hydaelyn said, where Azim was not really apt to rely on the convocation or summon the convocation for something like that. But in this case, you might be right that he or she would summon their friend.
Like, in the moment of the apocalypse, I have to think even Azim would be like, it's time to get some help.
I have to say that I don't think Azim's relationship with the patient was bad. I mean, I probably Azim was a headache for most of them, but I think they all were kind of close, and they were in relatively good terms. So I have to. This is one of my things when I actually pause to consider. Yes,
Would you say they were on Gulas terms?
Look, okay, that's over. Forget I said
Never.
anything. No, okay, no. In all seriousness, all things considered, I mean, I think Azim, when you pause to think what Vena and her tried to convince Azim to do was kind of, if Azim defected because they didn't agree with the Zodiark plan, it was kind of, what were you thinking when you tried to convince Azim not just to make another one of these things, but also turn against their former mates, you know? It's kind of
Just
I can feel Azim no response energy just from the stupidity of the whole deal, you know?
I do think that Aslan would look at it and be like, "So your solution to this problem is to make another problem?
That is a great primal.
At least this is one that I can punch.
I do also think that Aslan probably held some fondness in their heart toward the convocation or concern. I wonder if they understood what had happened. Obviously, the Vanask group didn't entirely understand. They were like, "Oh, the convocation is being stubborn." They didn't understand. The convocation is tempered. Since this appears to be the first instance of tempering, it makes sense they wouldn't know. It's unprecedented. But
Zodiark can do no wrong. Zodiark is the perfect answer because they were all tempered.
his aesthetic is on point. I have to give him that. But
Same.
I also think that the convocation had some bitterness toward Azim. It's a little spurious, but there's some hints in the lyrics of Fiend. You know, rose of redemption, but a thorn in your side. And then the way Elidibus mimics that thorn, he speaks at the end of 5.0 about the warrior of light being a barbed thorn, which can yet be pulled out and cast into the...
Or like what Emmett Selk said when we confront him in the Capitol building with the Scions, when will you... Like, you continue to refuse to see reason, like, even after everything that's happened.
I do find it... I think the thorn thing specifically is very intentional with the Azema Rose reference, but
Yes.
that's
I've leaned into that in my fiction. It's very compelling to me myself.
It's really good.
Also, Sephiroth, the primal being related, you know, that whole thing, the Mercidian Cathedral that the Elegants took hold to Azizla because to study the cathedral, they took it, and because they were intrigued by the cathedral dedicated to Sephiroth, bearing similar symbols to Azima.
Yes.
And yes, so
The
there's
tree people, it makes sense they probably worship the sun. That's where their food comes from, you know?
yes,
Worships the sun, mighty
and
protect-
there's and it's a Sephiroth cathedral, and there's the whole lyrics of Finn that one day we will make a special musical analysis show, and shit is going to be
I've torn that
well.
song apart in our Discord. One thing I found interesting is that I have 14 stanzas.
So anyways, yeah.
God damn it, Square.
That sounds intentional.
They were in there. All of the Warring Triad is just full of hint.
Yes.
Just like
Hint?
Stormblood.
Let's get-
Uh-huh.
And I thought it was just a shallow FF6 reference.
I love how they take references to other games and just weave it into the fabric of this one.
Oh, I absolutely agree. It's like they take what the other games did and then perfect it and refine it.
They rebirth it into something new, still a callback, but also fitting. And sometimes it fits better than other times, but a lot of that is up to personal preference and enjoyment too.
True, like all of Hildebrand.
Either Zeromus or Necron, Venusaur. Zeromus or Necron.
Ooh.
But we'll go into that in a little bit.
Yeah,
I
that
think with
reminds me, I
the
have a picture to
FF4
send to
theming,
Sal.
yeah.
I you know my stance. I think the final boss for 6.0 will be something completely from Final Fantasy 14 to Final Fantasy 14. I mean, it could be inspired by, but not exactly the final boss of. You know what I mean?
So what you're saying is Lunar Ravana.
Lunar Ravana.
Yeah,
I don't need another
I
one,
mean,
please.
yes.
So what you're saying is Mecha Gulis.
No, that's the weapon.
No, Gulis is a hero. All right, so
Moving on.
Zodiark was a kid
Everything's fine.
rebuilding a sandcastle on the beach, and then suddenly this girl comes up, kicks the sandcastle over, takes out a machete and cuts him into 14 pieces.
Wow.
And then throws
That's
him into
good.
the moon.
I'd watch
That's
it.
dark. That's dark for a lady of light.
It's worth mentioning that in the Word of the Mother cutscene after the Anti-Tower, she says something about, a moon bound. In other languages, she's much more plain about, I tied Zodiark up in the moon.
Yeah, which means, if Zodiark was at the core of the planet, it really reminds me of Habrea during Praetorium, where he was talking about, she's a parasite in the planet who replaced Zodiark, kicked him out, made him the moon, and then the Alligans were looking up at the moon and were like, hey, that's pretty good, and they made their own.
Yeah, everybody's making moons in Japan.
Right?
Speaking of the anti-tower in other translations, though, Neela, you should probably read off what you were posting in our chat, because some of that's quite interesting.
Do it.
Which particular bit?
Let's see. The
Why
one
don't you
under
start with
your
the word of the
smirky
mother?
face.
Say again. The smirky face. Yes. Let me find that bit real quick, because that was my quick and dirty. I'll do an actual translation. Pardon me while I scroll my document.
Yeah, Benanco decided that they were going to make their own primal with blackjack and hookers, and there was Hydaelyn. Drunk mom.
Number 6. There's number 6.
At this rate, we're gonna have to start keeping an on-screen counter.
Okay, Tara's got it.
Spirit Terror already has one going.
Actually, that's pretty simple to do. We can put a Meowth death counter. I'm all for it.
Let's do it. There's room in the bottom left.
Only if I get an Emmett counter to call you guys out on saying Emmett.
Yes. An Emmett counter and a Meowth death counter.
We can have a race every time.
We need a bond.
If we have any artists,
this is great. We're gonna do this.
I'll just start
If we have
calling
any
them
artists in
Hades.
chat, I really want an
Wait,
artist
how are you
rendition
doing
of
this right now?
the sandcastle getting kicked over and getting chopped up and thrown into the moon.
Right. So this is taken from the German cutscene.
She's crying now.
Oh no, it's okay. We still love you.
Okay. Moving on.
From the German portion of the Word of the Mother cutscene, which is referred instead of the phrase "Word of the Mother," she's called the voice of Hydaelyn. And she said, before all of life came into being, this planet was basically indwelt or animated by two forces. By myself, Hydaelyn, the light, and Zodiark, the darkness.
Lies.
But
Lies.
Absolutely lies. Absolutely lies.
It does seem. Oh yeah, that was the French one. I've got ahead of myself here. So the voice of Hydaelyn here says that Zodiark is trying to merge the dimensions again with the help of his disciples, the Ascian, in order to regain his full strength. And then she says, when this rejoining, this amalgamation is complete, and all the worlds have returned to their original form, a single world, Zodiark will surely be able to overcome me. She knows she's in trouble if that happens. Like, it's interesting. Also, just a fun fact, because I love it. In German, they refer to the rejoining by the term nova. Starbirth.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Much
But
more.
a lot of people I've seen don't understand, because Hydaelyn is far, far less powerful than Zodiark. But if you were to compare Hydaelyn to like this big, Zodiark to this big planet-creating weapon, like the amount of power required to create a planet and remake it, like I don't know, like a giant cruise ship. Hydaelyn would be like a screwdriver, it's specifically designed to take it apart.
Yeah, accurate.
He's designed. Zodiark is here. He's got the pieces. The souls are the box from IKEA, and he's ready to put it all together. You make the world.
Yeah, and Hydaelyn's the Allen wrench. Take it all apart.
Hydaelyn's an axe. Thank you.
I just don't know. It might be.
Too powerful.
The Axe of Light would like to ask you a question.
Yeah,
Hey, let me ask you something.
So I see Banana in the chat, and I know we've talked about this before, but comparing 14 Zodiark with Esper's Zodiark from Final Fantasy 12, because in that case, Esper Zodiark was a child, and the shitheads up above Lucavi, I don't know, deemed it too powerful and locked them away. So let's talk about that and what the summon animation looked like.
You mean the Courier? The Lucavi are
Yes, them.
the espers turned as considered thousands of years after 12. That's tactics terminology.
With the Lucaviar, you get a person, you stuff a what we call a primal in 14, a esper in that, and you get a Lucavi. So basically Shiva.
Kind
I'm
of.
not wrong.
I mean, it
is different because
it's kind of different because we also have the Orosite process playing in 14, but yeah, it's not that different actually.
But yeah, it is an interesting comparison between the themes that they brought forward from 12, because in Final Fantasy 12, Zodiark was imprisoned away as a child because they were afraid of his strength. He had the power over all basically natural laws. In 14, he definitely does recreate the natural order. They say the laws of the star had begun, the natural laws of the star had begun to fray, and Zodiark restored those. And then he was bound by Hydaelyn, and literal child or not, he had not been in existence very long. We get the impression that, again, very long by the ancients' timeline could be something very different. It's hard for us to know at this point.
Also point out, too, the relationship of Vana in this and the Vana in 12.
Oof. I mean...
Well, you just opened up a whole new can.
Well, I mean, just saying that anyone that I know, everyone I know that has played Final Fantasy 12, and the moment they read the name as Hydaelyn's heart, the collective reaction, myself included, was basically, oh shit.
Yeah. Yes.
I was not happy. I just sat back in my chair for a minute and stared at that name, and I was like, no, not this again, please.
For those that haven't played 12, let's touch on this.
Oh, okay. If I may, just to explain the thing.
Yeah.
Vana is a rogue Curia. In Final Fantasy 12, the Curia are basically god-like entities, and they have been kind of directing mankind's history and intervening when humans and the races of evil is war and stuff, and they had this thing that they call it Nephicite, which is basically a magic kind of it's Orosite actually. It made by the gods, and it's ridiculously powerful, and it's they actually had this mother crystal of swords in the Pharos of Ridorana, which, if you have played the Valley's Race, it may sound familiar. Okay, the Sun Crest was their source of power and kind of dominion for mankind. They cut shards from this to it's a bit complicated. And Vena was the dissenter that said, I don't like how the Curia are handling things. I'm going to go to Bain Solido, the son of the Arcadian Empire, and Dr. Sid to give them the secrets of how to make this absurdly powerful weapon, so the Curia will cease to have the reins of history in their hands. So we could argue that Vena's intentions were not evil, but in the end of 12, spoiler alert, while Van and the crew beat Vane and Vena's fusion, the Undying, Vena's purpose still is complete because she managed to make the crew destroy the Suncrest. And this, in the thousands of years between 12 and Tactics, would end in all races except the humans being extinct, and wars, destroying technology and everything. So, and society turns into the Middle Age, the corrupt Middle Age that we see in Final Fantasy Tactics. And that was because of Venat's way of handling things. So when Venat is a complicated antagonist in 12. Okay, don't laugh at my issues.
I'm not laughing at yours. I'm laughing at the picture.
Okay, okay, fine. But the thing is, Venat is complicated, but it's not less a truth that she is the responsible for Ivalice going basically to hell. To summarize the thing. And I'm not connecting the 12 and tactics timeline myself. This is something Yasumi Matsuno kind of said and confirmed. Kind of. I mean, I know that I think Matsuno said it was timeline, but it kind of turned out to be a timeline, if I recall correctly.
So Venat actually had a nickname called Venat the Corruptor.
Oh,
accurate.
Yeah.
I hadn't recalled that.
In 14, accurate.
She's called a heretic by Gerun, the leader of the Curia. Also a name that has been dropped in Final Fantasy 14, the Gerun Oracle, as you recall it.
Yeah, much concern. Venat in 12 is kind of an example of seemingly good intentions with a bad outcome, so it kind of makes sense that they chose that name.
I mean, that's
for,
Square Enix as, well, F.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so she being the heart of Hydaelyn is a major concern, because we know that it was in 12 she caused Ivalice's ruin and extinction of basically the purest form of magics. And actually, so that's actually kind of what Venat ended up doing in 14 in a sense. And we don't even know exactly the how deep the rabbit hole goes with Venat. So
that's just some interesting tidbits on the heart of Hydaelyn anyways. I just thought, with Venat, you could learn some interesting concept about, who Venat was, what the references were, and all that. But let's get back to Hydaelyn and Zodiark.
yes.
Since we spent so long on Zodiark, do we want to switch to Hydaelyn now, or do we want
to?
Let's.
About that, I sent Foul something that he should show if we're going to move on from.
I'm happy to show
Zodiark.
it whenever. I was waiting for a moment to ask. You
Uh,
guys want to
now
see
is
the
the time.
Zodiark final attack from Final Fantasy 12?
Yes.
Oh.
All right, give me just a second to set this up. In the meantime, I think with Hydaelyn, I don't know if anybody has the text readout, but the Word of the Mother dialogue would be nice if we had it. From Heaven's
I mean,
Word.
I have a video with all the dialogue in it.
I have German and French pulled up, but I don't have English at the moment.
go with the other languages? Well, that'll be fine.
Which particular bit are you looking for?
Yes.
Very.
The clip that discusses her intent, the coveting power section, essentially.
Oh, the darkness covered power. So we had to split them into 14 and bind them into the moon apart.
Interesting, I believe.
You know the funniest thing about the whole dialogue after Shadowbringers, that you read it and you're like, are you pinning on Zodiark what you tried to do? Like, you coveted power and you did this. Like, it's very easy to reverse the roles there,
Did someone say color inversion theory?
Yes,
I've been trying so hard not to make both
Nellia
of us
likes
go on a
reverse
tangent
colors.
about that.
I did it on purpose, I admit.
Gremlin. I will go ahead and start this by saying I'm pretty sure from what I was skimming this, both French and German do mention the dark coveting power.
Oh, we have the video.
Excellent.
Are we going to get it with sound, though?
It's really, really loud, so I advised him to deal with that.
You guys hear it? Can you guys hear and see?
Can't hear, you haven't muted,
Yeah.
but can see.
It's a little low.
It seems pretty good on my end.
Oh wait, maybe I can't hear it because I have the stream muted. Derp.
Same.
What's an arc?
It's the moon.
Just to see the
The moon's an
destruction
egg.
from here.
I have to say, Zodiark is Dark Elemental Esper, but his ultimate attack looks nothing like Darkness.
Look at that. That looks like the sky on the first.
Congrats, Zodiark, on their transition.
And now he's a Phoenix.
Yup. Rebirth.
Touch of Hades in there.
I want a cutscene in 6.0 that we actually see Zodiark and Hydaelyn come
That would be
Yes,
So
amazing.
epic.
This is a very intricate one. Oh, wow.
Yeah, I love it. It's one of my favorites.
It's great.
amazing.
It's great.
But it's always interesting to look at from the perspective of both really 12 and 14, where Zodiark is supposed to be aligned with darkness, but then you get that. And it's also interesting because the egg and the moon, there's just so much going on there that could tie into 14's themes. It's ridiculous.
His ultimate attack is called Final Eclipse, like, by the way.
Yeah, it's called Final Eclipse.
How final?
Hydaelyn's is called Breaking Things.
I mean, final's never final in Final Fantasy. It just keeps going.
Well, E8 is her sundering move is Shatter the World, so
She has a lot of concerning moves in E8, though.
absolutely. All the whole move set of Hydaelyn and E8 is all about sundering and very menacing names. I mean, it's like
Hunger.
And it's the dark aligned elements that pop up after the party is sundered.
So,
Yeah, because it's earth, water, and wind, right? I know it was earth and water.
Earth,
I never had to
water,
do-
and lightning.
Lightning is the other side.
Is it?
Oh, you have ones with now I'm confused. I have confused myself.
I don't have a strong memory of that phase.
I thought the earth ones a little, the water ones a lot, and the lightning. Oh yeah, and lightning because that's the ones that hurt.
the Earth one, yeah, the Earth ones because they cast Stone Skin and you had to interrupt it. Lightning ones because you had to grab the tether, and then the water ones
The light ones
just
have the tether.
no,
Lightning,
no.
okay.
The lightning one like range attacks. It's the light sprites that had the tether.
Mm.
But anyways, the whole interface is about Hydaelyn's crystal form absorbing ether. So that's also a concern.
Which
That's
is also very concerning. So, I get the impression because as the rejoinings happen, Hydaelyn mentions that she's been growing weaker. So Hydaelyn, I think, as soon as she split the worlds, was at the height of her strength. And as every rejoining happens, she gets weaker and weaker as Zodiark gets stronger. So I think their power is kind of inverse of each other.
That seemed to be like they are in the beginning. They were apparently not separated. They were one. So it seems like they're playing tug of war with essentially the planet and the
Yeah.
power
And
involved.
I kind of take that to mean that they were just kind of hanging out in the ethereal sea. They didn't really have a form. They weren't even really a concept until they were summoned. And when they were summoned, that's what split light and dark.
Would have beg to differ with that, actually. This is one of the ones I was like, I really got to share this at some point. In French, the word of the mother is called Hydaelyn's messenger. And she says, a long time ago, even before the first bit of life appeared, the avatar of light, Hydaelyn, and the avatar of darkness, Zodiark, merged into one being.
Lies.
None of the others would just say it this way, but it sounds like maybe they were made to be one. And then she says, over time, the darkness was greedy, and they increased their balance, and they increased their power, and the balance with the light was broken. And that's when Hydaelyn banished Zodiark to the moon.
That sounds more like an ancient creation myth than something that actually happened.
Yeah, I would also wonder, like, what exactly were they doing when the final days were happening prior to the summoning?
It brings to
If that's the
question,
case.
how did Hydaelyn know this? She wasn't embodied at the time of the final days. She wasn't embodied until just before the sundering. Do they have some primordial memory, or is she just going on what she was told? I've pointed out before that when you summon a free, you don't have to teach him how to talk, how to walk. He already knows all these things. He seems to have, like in the case of Ramu, has memory of these times. He says in the beginning, light and dark were one. What happened? When sprang this calamitous seed? There's some sort of persistent memory with the primals, it seems like, anyway. But how far does that go? I don't know.
Meanwhile, Titan's just an idiot.
Titan's just an idiot.
So yeah, Hydaelyn. So we know Vinazgru summoned her, and she broke Zodiark, and then we get the 14 shards, and then then we get the evil world of Hydaelyn, because Hydaelyn is the villain here.
Well, from a certain point of view, anyway.
But there's this thing, that it's kind of. I mean, amusing is not the word. It's like, have you noticed how the developers usually, I don't recall if they refer to the world as Hydaelyn. They actually use the world of Hydaelyn, which is actually, it's a very subtle way to clue you in that this is the world of Hydaelyn, because before that, Hydaelyn didn't exist. So we're calling the planet, the star, after Hydaelyn, which is actually even like throwing more salt to the Asians,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I seem to recall an interview with Yoshi P saying that the ancients did not refer to the planet as Hydaelyn. That was not the name of the planet.
They just called it the star, as far as I'm aware.
If the star had a name, it's probably, but it has more chances to be the star named Zodiark than Hydaelyn, because if they wanted to give the star its own will, it would make sense from a certain point of view that they would name the will of the star after the star. But actually, we don't know if Zodiark actually means something in the ancient language. It could be.
I mean, I would agree with that after summoning Zodiark, but before that, I mean, the name of the planet was Gulis, for all we know.
Yeah.
That's true. I don't think we have any idea what it might have been named. They may have.
Imagine naming your planet Gulis.
Imagine
we need a
not
picture. Has
naming
anybody
your
drawn
planet
Gulis yet? Seriously.
No, she won't do it, so we're just going to torture her.
For those who
until
don't
she
know,
does.
why don't we describe what the Gulis is for the audience?
No.
Is that like lupus? High five for
Okay,
getting that joke, Neela.
So to get everyone in on the joke, we were discussing the possibilities for diamond weapon in 5.5 the other day.
Oh God.
And
Can we
obviously
get through
now
this?
there's dying. So we were talking about, if it's not Xenos, then who's it going to be? We were talking about Varys, we were talking about Solace, and we were talking about Warrior of Light. So I went on a tangent about how it would be cool if it was Solace, and then it went horribly wrong. And the second phase, you just get Goo Boy Solace, in other words, Gooless, crawling out of Diamond Weapon like it's an egg and turning into a just unmasked sorcerer form abomination. And everyone just died at Gooless, and now we're going to torture Meowth until it happens.
So I just want to say that the entire fight phase of Star Warless out of Yoko Tara's nightmare.
He's already done it. It's actually the near raid.
Oh god.
I agree to Kefujaniel. Please no more.
That's funny. Regarding the name of Zodiark, it's a bit on the nose and kind of obvious, but it's a Zodiac arc, right? Like the convocation, all the stars. It's gotta be.
I have a better one. Bear in mind that the name Zodiark comes from Final Fantasy XII, where he didn't save the world at the time. It's clear. It is, to my mind, clear that it's a combination of the Zodiac and the element Dark.
Ah, I see.
It could be that they were looking forward to 14 and planning on having him be an arc to save the lifeboat planet.
Please don't bring
But I don't see that as like.
Don't bring the arc here, because I will go on a tangent on Final Fantasy 13, and you don't want.
Not that kind of arc. Don't worry about it.
No. It could well be. The arc in Lightning Return is what the people in the surface of Nova Chrysalia came to know as the moon. So when I say Lightning, my Final Fantasy 13 analysis are actually ticking a certain number of tick boxes for me for Endwalker. I'm not kidding.
I think 13 is actually very relevant. I didn't play through the 2 sequels because I thought that 13 was a linear train ride that didn't have all the perks that 10 did. But it was a good game, and it was very fun. But because of that, I missed out on games that may have made it actually a good series.
Yeah, I hear they got better as they went, but It was a good story with tedious gameplay.
Yeah, but essentially the Tempered as Lassie is an exact 1-for-1. So provided
the entire Square Enix store is on sale right now, so you can amend that if you really want to.
Yeah, go get it. It's a crazy sale right now.
If you have any doubts about Final Fantasy 13, come ask me. I have spent years studying the trilogy.
It's terrible. Don't listen.
So anyway, back to Hydaelyn and why she's evil. So besides splitting the world, I want to talk about this, about why I think Hydaelyn is the villain in this story. And any kind of moral candle people try to hold to the Ascians is really from a
the floor is yours,
flawed perspective.
Go for it.
So when Hydaelyn split the world, remember Emmett Selk, and we mentioned it here earlier, said that the ancients lived nigh for eternity. Which is not the case after the world was sundered. So Hydaelyn's greatest gift to humanity was mortality and death. And not only to one world, but 14 worlds. And that's multiplied over between 12,000 years and 20,000 years, because we know that the 13th, according to Koji Fox, was about 20,000 years currently, after sundering, whereas the source is only 12 because of that time dilation
so
stuff.
Our timeline versus, yeah, exactly.
Right. So we have, generations upon generations for multiple millennia dying from natural causes, war, disease, things, not calamities. And that's all directly tied back to Hydaelyn and the sundering. So if you want to talk about how many people have been killed by the Ascians, look at how many people have been killed by Hydaelyn, and it is vastly, vastly more. The Ascians have only killed a fraction as many.
I have to say that if someone ever tells you, just to give more support to Coburn's claims, because I agree. If anyone tells you, you're welcome. If anyone tells you that Hydaelyn has not endorsed genocide, tell them that in the Anti-Tower she explicitly tells the Warrior of Light that the Asians cannot be suffered to exist, and that's basically telling Asem to go kill their mates.
The last three ancients.
Yes, at the same and also at this point, at this exact point in the source, which race has been effectively obliterated?
The Carlians.
I have issues with this.
Unfortunately, it was not the Lalafels.
Right. I have issues with this conflation of introducing mortality into genocide, and as well as killing the last 3 Asians as a genocide. I think that there's flaws to both of these things. Like, one, it's a matter of scale, and one, it's a matter of, I mean, essentially you become mortal because your etheric density is low, but you get reborn anyway. So it's hard to kind of parse this in perspective of like real life morality, because as far as we know, this is it. So
there's an established context in this fiction which is vastly different from the real life context that we don't have all the answers for.
Exactly.
And so I would tend to agree with Fail.
Said genocide has a specific and particular meaning referring to eradicating a nationality, a people, some sort of identity.
Yeah,
which is
strictly
not
speaking, like if the last 10, like pick a World War I era ethnicity in Europe, for example, like if it's the last 10, is the last 10 the genocide, or is the rest
People
of it?
throw around the word genocide like it's candy, and it's not very accurate in this context. It's the, well, I won't even go there.
So I mean, I guess extinction would be a closer word.
Well, extinction is like, usually use that with animals, for example.
True.
Or for just natural effects that are eradicating things that you can't help.
Yes,
These sound an example of an
Hydaelyn,
extinction if it's not intentionally caused by something.
But in Hydaelyn's case,
it's mass murder.
I may have agreed, but one thing is an accident. But at the end of 5.0, Elidibus actually says that oblivion for the ancients, and that doesn't just mean getting rid of them, but also their culture, their story. The source doesn't know jot about the ancients. We only learn about the ancients because one of the ensembles took the trouble to explain and show us just a fraction, a minimal portion of their story. And Elizabeth says, you know the line, the screenshot I'm mentioning, that Elizabeth says that Hydaelyn Hydaelyn's grip on this, Hydaelyn's grip on the source and the star is growing stronger, and people remain oblivious to their story and their past, just as she and her disciples wanted. So, if it was deliberate, then we can actually call it. I would actually call it less accident, more intended massacre.
Yeah, and I want to build on that point before you start, in that because Zodiark was so vastly more powerful, Hydaelyn didn't have all those tools that she needed in order to maintain that stranglehold. So she resorted to ignorance, she resorted to manipulation, and she resorted to half-truths and lies in order to achieve what she needed to get done. And that extends to... sorry, lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
She is, in this essence, AI. She must fulfill her programming. She'll use whatever she can. It's not right, but it is what it is. The introduction of the primals was the original sin here.
Right. Oh, gaslighting. That's what I was talking. Yeah, gaslighting.
I do
as was
also want to
mentioned in chat
mention,
earlier.
like, when talking about the sundering and whether or not it's murder, we do have to kind of define, do we consider breaking down the souls to be a form of death because you're losing, parts of yourself and whatnot, or there's also the problem of we don't know if it was as simple as people were split into 14 and then lived a mortal life. We don't know if, for example, could have been such a calamitous event that there was also a lot of actual physical death tied to it, not just
So
soul shattering.
I don't necessarily think that there was a lot of physical death involved in the Sundering, but I do think there was the eradication of a culture and history, and that I
Indisputable.
would consider. Yeah,
That's
I
indisputable, yeah.
also wonder the actual battle between them could have been very destructive. We don't know. That's just a guess. And I also have this sneaking suspicion that the Sundering itself would have been the end of all of life entirely if something, fate, hadn't intervened. But we'll see. That's another thing that may or may not become a thing in 6.0.
Yeah, that's
I
kind
would
of my
agree.
thought
When you guys
too.
have a second.
Yeah, I would agree that it was a very destructive battle because when we find the ruins of Emerald, it's underwater. So that means that something happened because there was not a calamity on the first that would have caused that. So that had to have come during that period, in my opinion.
Who wanted to say something?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go Falhow.
Yeah, so the initial conditions for the summoning of Hydaelyn wouldn't have happened unless unless it came to be that they were sacrificing more and more of the people to make this plan happen. The initial was it I forget, I don't know what's wrong with my brain right now, but was it half and half again, or a quarter and a quarter?
It was 50%, 50%.
Yeah, so if you do the math from 100, right?
It's a little over 25%.
It's 75 people were sacrificed, and then what's left? You've got 25 people left. Assuming half of them were in Hydaelyn's camp, they sacrificed half of their group. So about 6.25% of the population there.
Well, so as far as we know, Hydaelyn's entire group, which appears to have been 12 people if you count that scene, it's implied that that's all that was sacrificed to summon forth Hydaelyn.
Exactly.
It is, but that could be the same as a convocation of Hydaelyn. We don't know.
Absolutely fascinating, considering that where they speak in the cutscene, they're like, "We're going to miss you, Venat." They didn't seem to be expecting to sacrifice themselves, only
I think
Venat.
they made a targeted being with a good kit, like it has a specific kit, which is etheric disruption and splitting apart. That's
the
exactly
whole the whole summoning of Hydaelyn. It just ticks many wrong boxes to me, because even so, it wasn't their decision to make, because they were. Venat herself admits that far more are on the vocation side than in theirs, and still they went through the plan. In absolute disregard of what usually ancient protocol and morals taught, that was consensus and civilized debate and discourse. But Venat's faction was like, no, we believe this and we're going to make it happen, even though the people doesn't agree with us. And that's like, okay, that's, if that sounds wrong to us, for the ancient society, that probably was unheard of.
I agree that it sounds very suspect and possibly reprehensible. That said, at the point Zodiark is summoned and the people are tempered, what right does Zodiark have to keep eating people?
Well, the people.
I guess what we don't know is how many of them were tempered, if
Correct.
all of them
We don't know
were,
if it's just
and what their
convocation.
opinion was if they aren't tempered, and just on and on. Like, there's a few questions there.
I mean, at ground zero, I mean, this is a planet tier god being. I highly doubt the entire city wasn't tempered, and who knows how far.
I would argue, though, we see what the Asians were doing. We see, rather, what the Convocation was doing on their way to create Zodiark. We go up into space over the planet, and we see there where they intended to summon him. Let me see if I can find the dungeon text, because I have that at hand.
The red cloud.
I've been yelling about that cloud for a long time.
It's interesting. The core of Zodiac's crystal is red. Do you think they just ate the red nebula?
Quite possibly.
It might have condensed it.
It could be, but at the same time, I think it may be a reference that Zodiark's heart is torn out like a wound.
I mean, I'm still standing by the red nebula could be an indication of the live stream or something like that.
I actually agree in a sense.
What he says in the Amarot dungeon, as you're approaching, you go to that last section. He says, just a little further and you will see the end of a world. The star was fading. We saw we had to weave its laws anew. But between us and our goal, this is where they're going to create Zodiark, loomed a final misbegotten fiend, which was, of course, the final boss. And then during that fight or whatever, he says, from the depths of despair, the last harbinger arose. Its voice was fulgent destruction, and none could stand in its path. And as it edged inexorably closer, we knew, without decisive sacrifice, our star would surely perish. I believe it's strongly indicated that they are up there in orbit, essentially around the planet, creating Zodiark.
Yeah, I think this is the final choice that we have here.
It would make sense. It would make sense if they were trying to perform an unheard proportion. I mean, some summoning of unheard proportion. They would try to keep it away from the people just for safety reasons. I mean, it would be stupid just to summon the thing right in the middle of Amarot. You know,
also, it's probably going to be full and huge. I've pointed out before the crystals we see in the center of the chests of the drawings on the walls on the murals in the Katana Ravel. The crystal we saw with Hydaelyn was flippin' massive, and that's just her heart.
So I want to bring up one point on the topic of tempering. In a lot of cases, when we do see a summoning, it's usually the summoners who we see who are tempered, not everybody in the immediate area.
Primal sometimes
true.
goes out to temper other people, but it's
Immediately.
usually a deliberate action on their part. The blue fire.
and I would argue that Zodiac doesn't have the impulse to temper people. At least
I've seen that as well. That's just an impression, but it's a guess that several of us have had. Yeah. I mean, it's not canon. That's all I'm saying.
It's not canon, but we do know that when Hydaelyn actively gets people, and this hints strongly at tempering, Albert actually wonders it aloud. We don't actually get Zodiac aside from the Unsundered, Mitron, Logriff. I mean, Gaia is Logriff reborn, and she is awoken as an Asian of sorts, but she is not tempered by Zodiac. So, and
the
she
tempering, it sounds in her case, it seems kind of like the powers are transferable, but the tempering isn't between lives.
That's right.
And Elidibus and the other Unsundered doesn't do. They don't. From what we see, they don't try to force this tempering on the other Asians. They had theirs because they are Unsundered, but for the others, they seem to. I mean, Van Daniel actually points this out. I have free will. I'm doing this because I want. I mean, I don't actually recall how he
I have his lines memorized.
I know,
fear.
yeah.
As a sundered individual, however, I never had.
Exactly.
As a sovereign individual, however, I never had much interest in the matter.
That. So.
Well, he's certainly not tempered, and my
Yeah,
behavior is
are
not of one temper.
They're not tempered.
This is a rabbit hole, though. I mean, the tempered thing. I've discussed this in chat with you, and I'm sure it's come up on different weeks. But like, we just don't know if it even means anything to someone as powerful as Hades. Like, they're clearly doing actions that are directly in conflict with the goal.
Well,
they just.
he outright says that they're tempered.
He does.
I think
but what does this mean?
Exactly.
Like, if one can say, "I am tempered," tell me if that means anything.
Where is the glass ceiling on tempering? Where do you hit the wall? Where are you forced to turn around? I think that's why, personally, my take is that's why at the end of the dying gasp there, once he said, all right, this isn't working, I can't use this person to forward both Zodiark's plans and, also get them on find a compromise that Zodiark would be okay with is my expectation.
Yeah, but like, is this like, does he have a phone call open to Zodi?
We have no indication that anyone has a direct connection to Zodiark.
As far as we know, Zodiark is not even fucking conscious right now.
Like, even Elidibus didn't seem to have an active connection to Zodiark. He kind of had to, along with the other Unsundered, figure things out as they went.
And that's how they came up on the moon.
That's how they came up with the concept of the rejoinings to begin with, through trial and error, because they didn't actually know what the fuck they were going to do.
Yeah.
Mommy took her crystal golf club, whacked Zodiark in the head with it, and he has been unconscious for
that's funny
millennia.
I have this joke about the dying gasp fight, like just before he pieces out and changes form. I imagine he's going back to the convocation chamber and he just grabs the statue. And he comes back and uses it as a crystal focus.
The staff is actually in the lore book, and quite funny.
Beating your coworker to death with a crucifix.
I'm gonna go dark cloud over to the moon and grab my mallet.
I really hope we ride that thing back to the planet.
We just ride the staff.
There's strange love.
Get on.
They could even use that as a way to mimic us coming back on Midgard's corners back at the end of Heaven's Ward and be like,
what have we
have some extra feels?
Do you think after being rejoined 7 times that Zodiark has started to wake up and he's actively creating stuff on the moon?
So
at the end of 2.0, he did seem to
sitting at his
contact
workbench.
us.
The vision after ARR, it really seems indicated that something about awakening Sabik has had him wake up and start reaching out.
Yeah, that echo vision is really, really odd because they use a different filter on it than normal too, and we get that vision different from any other echo vision. So I'm pretty sure.
We watch all our friends.
Additionally,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I would say that who should go?
Core.
No. Go ahead.
Okay. If that's the case, because I tend to think that he is trying to reach out after that point. Would that perhaps be one reason to explain why the Asians are so hot to trot to get another rejoining out the door so quickly after the 7th one?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, that could be because normally they take so much time between calamities because they need to
thousands of
rebuild
years.
the world and they need to build up humanity more. And I mean, there's an argument that Bahamut didn't really destroy much, but then there is also the problem of restoring elemental equilibrium before causing another calamity.
And that takes a long time.
Part of the reason they were in such an all-fired hurry for the 8th is because the 7th had already kicked things too far toward dark. Elidibus mentioned this.
That was his
point.
Yep.
What's more, they also state Nabrialis's actual eradication as, we better move up our time scale.
But we're listing towards light by the time Shadowbringers begins.
Yes.
So it's like this inevitable seesaw of possible planet destroying. We never knew it was going to happen. Death.
It seems to be because the first is highly highly aspected toward light.
To begin with, yeah.
Through.
But we're winning a lot.
Which is
Yeah,
what happened?
a lot
Too much.
I wanted to. This isn't exactly on topic, but the Varys Solus cutscene at the end of Stormblood, I always really enjoyed because he basically says that, if aught comes between light and dark, it's your job to remove it. So if we weren't trying to be the good guys, the Empire might be the good guys. But because
More than
we're the
likely,
good
yes.
guys, they have to be the bad
Yeah.
guys. Like that's the entire point.
And that's kind of a whole other topic of discussion, is how the Empire really does treat its people more equitably than the city-states of
Absolutely.
Alphanark.
So if this teaser intrigues any of you, Garlemald has been on our poll for a while, so feel free to vote for
Yes.
it.
That is actually something we should talk about in that context, but also like in a Bajta context, because Bajta is
True.
very much exemplifying that too.
We will save a Bajta podcast for another time, though. That's a big
Yep.
one.
We got
Yeah,
lots of
there's a lot.
topics, so we'll have a poll up when we're finished up here in the next couple days for people to vote.
Back to the topic of going to the Flood of Light because going to the first because we were winning too much. I genuinely believe that we had to go to the first there, or we would have caused a Flood of Light on the source. We kept winning. We kept winning.
Agreed.
I think it was necessary to yank us and be like, "Hey, don't do too much light, and here's why." And it was admirable.
I actually think that us continuing to operate on the source as we had would have made it so that the Asians could not have initiated the rejoining, because it would have caused that flood of light.
And consider also this: they tell us that the shards all have elemental connections to each other, and especially to the source. This is why, according to the little bit of lore dropped from the Void Quest, when the Flood of Darkness occurred, the first ended up too light because it sucked away the darkness. They're mostly connected to the source, but there are connections between each other. Consider what would happen if there was a flood of light or darkness on the source, with the big connections to every shard. What are the likelihood they wouldn't all get vacated, wouldn't all get just completely kaput?
You know, I
More
find it
likely they
really
would be.
interesting that us winning is even significant enough to alter etheric balance. Like, that's a part of the metaphysics that I've always just kind of raised my eyebrows, and I'm like, okay, I kind of get it, but why? Why is our
Avatar of
victory?
Light, Convocation.
Look at it this
Yeah.
way. On the first, the reason that light became so overwhelmingly powerful was because you had 5 heroes, was it 4 or 5 heroes with crystals of light. We have 6.
It's also very significant. They Capstone Roll Quest. Sorry if anyone hasn't finished it yet and doesn't want spoilers. Give you a moment to mute for the next minute or so. But yeah, the Capstone Roll Quest actually goes quite a bit into the details of the sacrifices these people made, and those sacrifices earned them their crystals of light. Presumably, they couldn't manifest them because there's a lot less ether on the first than the source 7 times rejoined.
Right. So I have one more thing I want to bring up, which is that in order to stay manifested, primals need a steady source of ether. And where is Hydaelyn getting hers?
The live stream.
Yeah. So you think she's feeding on the souls? I think she's feeding on the souls in the live stream.
But
Absolutely.
so would have Zodiark needed.
We don't know that
So
for sure.
we don't
Well,
actually.
primal's a primal.
The Word of the Mother thing also tells us that Zodiark had been in the Ethereal Sea. What she says here, let me find it real quick.
While you're
which
looking
is
it up,
which is actually a lie, because in the second Tale from the Shadows, when Elidibus withdrew from Zodiark, it was in the planet because everyone saw the thing happen.
I imagine Crystal Daddy and Crystal Mama as more of like solar-powered entities that kind of use the life stream to charge up, but aren't necessarily consuming the essence of the planet. Because if they did so, Zodiark at least, it would be against the writ. Like, that's not his role.
It would
His
have
role isn't
been
to eat. It's to
it would have been against the whole purpose of them saving the world from being destroyed.
Baron
Even
preserved.
Hydaelyn didn't want the star to be destroyed. That's
Yeah,
why she
they wanted to
split it.
preserve it. They wanted to preserve it. And additionally, if they had been eating the star would be dead long before we showed up in the current situation.
I believe that it's hinted at that because the ancients speak of being custodians of the planet, being, I'm
Stewards.
blanking on the word, where you take care of it and you like try and grow it, basically. Stewards of the planet. Sorry. That took me a moment. And they also speak after after the second sacrifice. They say we'll grow its life to burgeoning and sacrifice a portion of that. I think that's that particular issue is why they couldn't simply create Zodiark or their grand savior with the star's energy, because at that time it had run down to basically nothing. That's why that's why Hydaelyn says they sacrificed their lives, because they couldn't use that.
But the reason the stars. Sorry.
So I'm sure that's a portion. First off, that could be one explanation. They aren't necessarily killing more people. We don't know. They probably are, because otherwise, why would Benat and company oppose them? It's because she's sus, but never mind. Oh crap! I forgot where I was going with that. Because the same way that the ancients had vast reserves of ether that they could use to create things, the star is supposed to hopefully would have this vast reserve to create more life, and they could, in theory, do stuff with that. That would be what the will of the star would be subsisting on in a perfect world where nothing's gone wrong. Just a theory.
But at the same time, the reason the star was running so low in energy, that Hydaelyn actually describes it like the intro of Final Fantasy 1. Like the wind has ceased to blow, the land was rotting, and the waters were blighted. Everything that happened, it seems to be that the very reason was that the sound absolutely wrecked the live stream, and what we needed Zodiac was to reopen the gates of the flow of life to the live stream, and they made it happen with, let us say, soul energy, because the sacrifice blah, blah, life force basically, and that's why they had to sacrifice them another portion of their population. But if the reason is the star was running low of energy because of the sound, that means the sound is feeding directly to the live stream, or making the live stream go ill and whatever, and that thought, considering the sounds will cause the final days, is highly concerning at this point of the story.
I agree.
I mean, it's not just that. I mean, for starters, let's just picture that the sound was still in some form in the live stream when the sounding happened. If Hydaelyn has been feeding off the live stream, has she been feeding off the sound as well? While Zodiark was kind of intact because he was bound in the moon, away from the flow of the live stream.
I want to add that the ancients didn't really know what the sound was. They only really addressed its effects, and that, like Meowth said, has Hydaelyn been feeding on the sound by feeding on the live stream? Because it's very much still there. Like, Zodiark didn't remove the sound. It just changed how things worked so that it couldn't manifest.
Yes, he gave the planet ibuprofen instead of taking,
Yeah, Zodiark was a band-aid, and technically so was Hydaelyn, but I do want to say the one good thing Hydaelyn did by sundering the world, and I think this was fully unintentional, was buy a lot of time for everyone to kind of figure out what the sound was and finally address it.
And then
I think it was fully intentional.
That it wasn't.
In a sense.
Be wrong.
I'm not so sure. I mean...
Stated, according to Venat, the stated purpose was to bind the darkness, to have an equilibrium, not to destroy the darkness.
Yes.
Yes, but they also, there's no mention from them. There's no mention to let's destroy the sound. Their concern is Zodiark, not the sound, and that could be the definite the point. I mean, because Zodiark is an anti-sound primal, but Hydaelyn is an anti-Zodiark primal. And right now, what we need is an anti-final days solution. And Hydaelyn is not made for.
I have a few stray thoughts, and this is tinfoil hat tier, because I don't actually think that Zodiark, for example, tempered the entire planet for reasons. Like, there wouldn't be a Hydaelyn. Ranges probably do great. He doesn't seem like he likes to. But one good way to keep people from manifesting their deepest fears is to temper them and control their thoughts.
Interesting. I like to think that Zodiark just changed the way that creation worked.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that.
I mean,
but it's a good thought experiment.
It is.
No,
it is.
It's back at Silk's line from Amrot's dungeon where he says, once the fear is taken root, it cannot be expunged.
Right.
That tempering, looks at that line, looks at the sound.
I mean,
instead of tempering being accidental like we've thought for a while it could be, it could have actually been an intentional mechanic, possibly.
I think it depends on the primal, because when we look at Shiva didn't temper anybody.
Yeah, some want followers.
Wait.
I don't believe that.
Did Shiva not temper? Did Shiva not temper any of the heretics that followed Lily's heart?
My understanding was that they were tempered. Once her will was enacted, they were just free to do whatever because she was satisfied.
Right. Well, also, like, going back to her, it wasn't really Shiva per se. It was a human hosting a primal entity rather than becoming a primal entity. One of the first examples after the Sahagin chief that we see before, say, Xenos, where the power is subservient to the will, not the other way around.
That brings up an interesting point. If that is the case, and she is the summoner, with help, but she was the only summoner, and the echo prevented her from tempering.
Right.
This would perhaps indicate the only way to become initially tempered is if you're staying by but not summoning, fine. It seems the indication anyway.
There was a time when we thought the echo was Hydaelyn's blessing, but now that we know that they are different, it's likely that the echo is what allows control, and the blessing simply creates a barrier from other primals trying to eat you.
Or at least
because you're already eaten. Of
like
course.
double protection.
But I mean, if Isel could keep Shiva, I mean, she is the host to Shiva, then Elidibus was the conduit of Zodiark in a sense, or then.
Yes.
The whole thing is, do you think Elidibus, if he wasn't have deliberately subjugated the people to Zodiark's will?
I think he could have. I think this is why they chose a child, similar to the Final Fantasy XII version of the child Zodiark, because someone who is innocent and kind of worships their friends and is all good and isn't ruined by the world yet might have the innocence necessary to not, at least to not go too far.
Elidibus is not exactly a child.
Definitely not young. A child. He was in youth. Actually, the Japanese uses a particular word that's used for, anime and stuff, to refer to a young man but adult. There's been some confusion and problems with this in the past, so I step up. I don't speak Japanese. No one told me.
Seinen.
Seinen, yeah.
To exemplify, the Japanese still refers to, for example, Elfino, who is late teen, as shonen, but Elidibus is seinen, which means he would be like in his early 20s, mid-20s, more.
Yeah.
Whatever
according to Wiki says roughly young adult or adolescent. It is interesting. Not a child, regardless.
From people who spoke Japanese.
I always got the sense from the second story that that Emmett Selk is in, the short story Tales of the Shadows that has Elidibus in it, that he was definitely more of a young man by the standards of the ancients. I always found it also unusual that they would consider allowing a child onto the convocation, even in those circumstances that we mentioned a moment ago. And it
Has
makes
to be
more sense
outsized
for him
power.
to be.
Period.
A prodigy.
It just makes more sense for him to be a young man, still impressionable, but
one thing is for certain, he was the youngest of the convocation at the time of the final days. I think that's basically sort of confirmed that he was the youngest, which actually makes me wonder how, in mortal terms, how old Emet-Selch and Asem may have been at the time, and how old, for example, Lahabrea may have been, because Emet-Selch does address Lahabrea as the old man.
So we're winding down to about 10. We got about 10 minutes left before we close out. Does anyone have any closing arguments, closing thoughts to keep in mind? We've talked about quite a bit here, actually, including our
I
own
do have
preparation.
one thing to say.
Go ahead, Cobb.
Do not believe Hydaelyn's lies. She's a liar.
She's a filthy liar, despite her obvious niceness.
Yes,
don't
she
believe
did
Ondor's lies.
Yeah,
No.
she did the
Zero
right
creep.
thing
Hi,
for
Captain
the
Bosch.
wrong reason.
Memes aside, it's pretty clear that they're going for an everyone sucks here angle with Hydaelyn and
Yeah.
Zodiark.
I agree, but I do have one.
Yes.
This is kind of an important point that I've waited till the very end to mention. I think of Zodiark as a save the planet primal. That's it. And I actually think of Hydaelyn as an anti-sound primal, because if you sunder all the souls, they no longer have access to creation powers, and therefore cannot rip the planet apart again in 30,000 years.
Yes,
And they possibly infected by the sound primal.
But don't listen to her lies.
Yes, I agree with that. I just think that she that wasn't
Her
they
methods,
weren't thinking about the
you
You don't
sound.
think it was intended. You think it was secondary.
Right.
Yeah, because what we do know about the Elder Primals is they were summoned with a directive, right? They're essentially advanced crystal AI. Zodiark's directive was quite simply salvation. And we don't know what Hydaelyn's is yet. All we have are various snippets that indicate, beware the bearer of the crimson brand, darkness must go bye-bye, and all this other crap that isn't actually an answer.
Speaking of which, I'm making a note to ask again if that means that when we finally do get Asim's glyph, which we better in 6.0,
Oh, we will.
or I will riot, if their glyph is going to be red or not.
I think it'll be black.
I think they'll still have a color, but that it'll be maybe different.
I think it'll be blue unless our tempering is removed.
Yeah, I hope
before
it's
then.
not blue, because blue means, oh no.
No, please no.
Incidentally,
Blue or white, it's over.
if you look at the
Yeah, we need a
animation
new
of the,
art piece.
if you look at the animation of the invocation of Eld that our crystal lets us do in the Seat of Sacrifice, it has a very similar sort of ripply theme effect to the Asim glyphs. I'm just very suspicious of that. That's why I'm in
If
camp.
it was gold, I'd be all for that for various reasons.
God, I
Yeah,
hate
the,
gold. Give me
Do you want to touch
silver.
on that? It's not the topic, but we've
Yeah,
gone
the
off
glyph on the
tangent.
ground actually has a lot in common with the Traveler set that we get at the end of Stormblood.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Have a
really
picture
excited
of
to
it?
see what we get at the end of 5.5. What clothes Totaro makes for us this time.
Also, this is kind of the glyph. Do you when I said does not this glyph kind of look like the towers? And that's still
breaking that down. Yeah. Anyway, we can play that quick if you want.
But
You mean
still,
those
anyways.
towers of Garlean design?
Okay, where's
It's evil. It has to be
my-
Garlean. There we go.
That's so funny.
Oh, that is very slowly uploading. I'm sorry.
What is that? Number 9, 8, 9. Yep, there we go.
I love the astronaut gear. This is perfect.
I want it.
Oh, I want that.
I want a space helmet.
I'm sorry. I'm going I'm never going to live it down. It's Guardian evil. It's just.
Imagine walking up to Zodiark with a space helmet on. Sup?
Oh my god, 6-0. Thank you for that
Daft Punk is
picture.
better,
It's perfect.
I really want to speak to Zodiark.
Zodiark the Chocobo. I love it.
Now I kind of want to rename my Chocobo.
Same.
Zodiark.
We need art for it. Come on, it's a Chocobo Zodiark. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm renaming my Chocobo right now.
Zodiark.
No, but really, I mean, I think it's inevitable. We're going to. I mean, we've had Hydaelyn fill our heads with with nonsense for our.
I'll just say it. It's shit. It's shit.
Yeah. I was
It's
trying to be
propaganda shit.
I was trying to be proper, okay? But yeah, shit.
Put that up on screen, foul. Before Meow goes on more.
No problem.
But,
the picture in the Discord?
Yes.
This is actually really important. I'm seeing something different now than I've seen before. To me, it looks like a sword sliding into the back of a kite shield.
Warrior of Light?
Just a moment.
Yeah, it kind of does.
Yeah, that held interesting. The radiant bits looks a little different, but still very interesting.
But yes, I mean,
It still reminds me so much of the masks that we get at the very end of Stormblood in the Traveler's Attire.
Which is from that post.
Yeah, that thing.
Indeed.
yes. I mean, yes. But yes, I mean, I keep my head keeps going to the possibility of meeting Zodiark, and he's absolutely terrified at what the hell is going on because he's been asleep and bound for so long he doesn't have any clue why in the first place he is bound apart. Because it's like in Final Fantasy XII, Zodiark was the only Esper that we can get that did not rebel against the Curia. He was simply imprisoned because he was powerful and the Curia feared him. So in the same vein, I feel like Zodiark could be in the moon, wondering like, what the hell did I do wrong? Because I saved them. What did I do to make them hate me? So you know what I'm trying to say, and in a sense, Elizabeth may not be the child Zodiark is technically, but Zodiark by himself could be very innocent, like a child, because as far as he's concerned,
if it's still Tuesday, they need to call
he
out. I'll be
may
here.
not have any idea of why Hydaelyn tore him apart. You know.
All right, I have to stop you there, Meowth. We have 2 minutes, and
I stopped.
Info about the picture that's up on screen.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
Neela, if you're still here, go ahead.
Hi, yes. This was my staring too hard at the towers. You know how I am with Findaniel's tower. I can't help it. I just can't stop looking. Anyway, so I kind of spotted this potential interpretation of what the glyph might be referring to. I was driven to this because in Final Fantasy XII, the summoning glyphs that appear again in the Academia Anator are what these scions of light in 12, Asians in 14 were in opposition to, and I was like, well, what would Asm be opposed to? What would they be, directly combating? I was like, well, goodness gracious me, what about the final day? And that's how that kind of clicked together. And yes, the negative space on the glyph here, you'll notice on the golden glyph, matches closely with the adornments on the scion attire.
Look at the hook of the triangular portion and interface it directly on top. Can you see it?
Or I can give you a picture.
Yeah.
Okay. More pictures.
More pictures.
Yeah, there was an analysis picture on this out there that was really good.
if you
Yeah,
remember
I'll
Twitter.
put the post to the Reddit thread in Twitch chat.
So this has been planned since long ago.
Years and years in the making.
Or repurpose could be.
Could be. But like I imagine they had the broad strokes established many years ago and have been filling it in gradually with more detail as time goes on.
Still, there's a structure I keep side eyeing with suspicion in the Tempest, and that's the Walls of Forgotten. The first big ass ancient, supposedly ancient structure where the Ondo do their ritual that we find, and it's distinctive. It's quite different. It's quite different from your see the whole Amortine architecture, and the Walls of the Forgotten look like more like a tower than an Amortine building. Just to
They don't
say
have
it
the style,
plainly.
and all the Amortine buildings still have intact windows, and it does not.
Well, time's up, fellas. Any final statements?
That's all. That's all for me.
You guys did most of the talking today. I knew you guys were gonna eat into this, so I pretty much stayed out of it and kind of moderated a little bit. So my thoughts on it were pretty much the same as you guys. I mean, we talk about this over the Discord quite a bit, but I know you guys are more vocal about it than I would be.
I am very vocal about it.
My expertise lies elsewhere. And I know Cobran was looking forward to this day for a long, long time. So
yeah, I try to remain a bit more measured when it comes to her, but I definitely feel like a lot of us have been building up to this moment of like, well, now we definitely need to like talk to her again and like ask her a lot of hard questions at the very least, and maybe punch her in the face.
Yes, especially the punching.
Exactly.
But I do think that we will not be the first to get to her. I think that Xenos will beat us there.
Yeah, Xenos is going to get there and eat her.
Let's hope. Let's hope.
Stop it, Bunk.
I swear we're going to be censuring Meowth like they used to do with Zen.
Facts. All right, friends, thank you so much for joining the Lorelines podcast. It's been an absolute blast. We'll see you next week, and hopefully I'll be here. I missed last week, but glad to be back, and let's keep kicking butt.
Yes. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everyone.